I'm going to be talking to you in the few times that I get a chance to speak around this idea of the other 6 days. Now, for some of you, that was a little unclear last week. You're like, what does the other 6 days mean? And I'm like, wow, fail. That's what I felt at the end of the sermon if you didn't get that. Okay? All right, let me try again. The other 6 days just reference Monday to Saturday, okay? All right? I don't know if I was that clear last week. And what we're trying to understand and recognize is that not only is this a special day, an opportunity, the gathering together to worship collectively and to be here, that this time, this day matters to God. But I don't want you to feel like in some way that somehow these other days are lesser than. No, they all matter to God. And so we're going to be talking a little bit about the other 6 days, kind of how does God fit into and in and around our lives as we go through the Monday to Saturday also. Now, this won't surprise you, but I believe, my bias is that God's way is the best way for us to understand truth and discover life. As we discover how we were created and how God has designed us and wired us up to best experience life here on earth. I really believe that Jesus is the way, the truth, and the life. And therefore, I think it's the best opportunity for you is to follow him in all of life, for all of life. It's a simple little phrase, but it references this idea, this reality of the other 6 days. That all of life really does matter to you and really does matter to me and ultimately matters to God. And so therefore, there are choices that you and I have to make. We have to wrestle with and decide what we are going to build our life on or around. There's all kinds of ideologies. There's all kinds of worldviews. There's all kinds of values out there. But where or in what will we find our ultimate purpose? Where and in what might we find our ultimate happiness? Contentment. What is it that's going to shape our identity? Where are we going to discover and find wholeness in all of life and for all of life? So last week when we sort of did this little intro message, we looked at 3 different texts. This morning we're going to dive just a little bit deeper into Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. Let me read these 2 verses for you. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. And this is your true and proper worship. Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. I mentioned last week a significant phrase here is in view of God's mercy. I am not here today, as I'm sharing these messages, these talks, I'm not trying to heap upon you just this weight of expectation and responsibility. And yet we do have some responsibility in view of God's mercy. In view of what he has done for us, we are now to respond. It's interesting, a lot of the epistles and the New Testament letters, they'll often make a comment, live a life worthy of what God has done for you. And Paul puts it this way, in view of God's mercy, live in such a way. This is kind of an idea of what is your lens for life? Like when you sort of look at life, what is it that shapes how you evaluate what's taking place? And maybe what you need to do in response or act in all that is happening. I'm sure many of you have smartphones, and every once in a while you maybe dive into the reels, right? Those things that just kind of just keep coming every 30 or seconds or a minute or so, and some of them are well worth your watch, there's no doubt, and some of them aren't, frankly, but they hook you in a little bit. There's one that shows up periodically on my feed that it just absolutely warms my heart. It's just a beautiful little thing. And it's the one where you've got this, it must be a parent, right? Holding on to this little infant. Not truly a baby, but probably not quite a toddler, and just a little thing. And clearly there's this other person there, so they must be a specialist of some form. And this, little one is doing what little ones do. They're moving around and slapping the face of the person that's holding them, trying to grab their nose, and all this kind of stuff. They just don't know what's happening with their arms and everything. And then all of a sudden, you see this other person who is sitting there, and they've got these glasses, right? I heard some ums already. You know what's coming. It's come up on your feed. And it's such a beautiful thing. And this person sort of wrestles these glasses onto this little infant. And they're kind of, doing what they do and fighting and all this kind of stuff. And then all of a sudden, it just sort of stops. And this little smile comes on their face. And they're so excited because all of a sudden they can see mom or dad. They hear the voice and they all of a sudden can see, and things are coming. It's a beautiful thing. And I'm thinking this morning, it would be really great if on the reel of my life, all of a sudden, my Heavenly Father would be holding on to me. And I might be slapping and flailing around in life, right? And I might sort of be wrestling with the idea of him putting this lens on me, right? Because get that off of me, I don't want that. But all of a sudden, when I allow him to have his way and get that lens on, all of a sudden life just takes on a clarity and a beauty that is unmatched. And so I think that's what Paul is calling us here to. How do you see? What do you see? We could change the analogy a little bit too. If that analogy doesn't work for you, you could, if you're anywhere near my age and you have glasses, you've got bifocals, transitions, multiple ways to be confused, really. Actually, it's not that though, right? It's multiple ways actually to find the right thing. And I believe what Paul is telling us here is that life is going to be challenging, and we sometimes need to adjust a little bit what we are thinking is right and maybe see things a little bit differently, and all of a sudden they come into view. Are you willing to enter into that is kind of what Paul is calling us to. Are you understanding that this is our responsibility as we go into life? And he's saying, listen, in view of God's mercy, that lens, that ability to see life, in view of who he is and what he's done, we are to live our lives, offering our bodies, offering our life, offering our, 24/7, 365, whatever, the other 6 days, offering our lives to him as a living sacrifice. We talked last week this idea that it's a living sacrifice. That's a little odd. We think of sacrifices as something that's put down, that's killed. We're going to be doing communion later, and that was Jesus. But he's asking us to live in view of God's mercy, in light of all that he has done and all that he offers us in our day-to-day, to live our life for his glory. To live holy and pleasing all of life, 6 days, in such a way that becomes our act of worship. Like, it's beautiful when we gather here. You've heard me say that. I find it so encouraging. There are some weeks where I just need you to be singing these words over me. Because life, man, it can smack you between the eyes and knock you around a little bit. I just need a reminder And the worship here is beautiful. And sometimes because of what we've got now in our little pockets, and we can, go on Spotify or Amazon Music or I don't know, whatever music thing you got, right? And all of a sudden you can just type in worship music. And it's so beautiful how God can use these things to help recalibrate and remind us of who God is, what he's done, and what he's going to do. It's a beautiful thing. But that is not the totality of worship. You see, our worship is what our lives are based on. Like how we live our lives reflects truly what we worship, what we value, what is significant to us. And so as we leave here having had an amazing opportunity to allow God to speak to us, to be in community, to have this time where we just dedicate this time and God can do and say things to us, remind us. It's beautiful. And then, as we leave, does our life reflect the beauty of what just took place in here? Are we recognizing the opportunity and the responsibility to live these things out in the day-to-day? This is what Paul is calling us to. And so in verse 2, he carries on and he says, do not conform to the pattern of this world. Don't conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will. There's a way to live this life, which is we can come in here and worship and have an amazing time and be truly moved. There's no doubt about it. But then leave here, and as we sort of check through these back doors, or maybe as we exit out onto Wilkinson, to all of a sudden just have things checked off. It just, that done. I was here. That was good. Whew, okay, next. And then we just get into our next and we get into our own way. See, the patterns of the world we live in, the culture in which we live, there are family patterns, there are values, there are ideologies, and they're all around us and they come at us constantly. And Paul is saying, just be careful. Be careful. He says, do not conform to what is around you, but be transformed by renewing your mind. We talked about this last week, that Jesus came to offer a new kingdom. Not a kingdom of this world, but a spiritual kingdom that is over and in amongst this world for you and for you and for me. See, I believe in order to live in the fullness of Jesus, we need to believe he is the way, follow, right? We just went through that for a year and a half. He is the truth. I really think he is the best way to understand life and to experience it. And so we need to renew our minds. And then as we're doing those things, that we might find true life in Jesus. But what I also know is that conformity can be so, so subtle. This has been an issue for Christ followers in every decade, century, millennia of the church, and always will be, because we are called to be here. And the questions and the patterns of the world that Paul and the other authors of the New Testament, certainly Jesus as he taught and he lived and as he interacted with people, the challenges of the patterns center around some very, very simple but significant things. And one of them is just, who am I? Who am I? You know, the whys, the whats, the wheres of life. Like, where do I belong? What is ultimately matters? What really is it that ultimately matters? And who gets to shape that? And Paul is saying, let God, let Jesus, let the Spirit have that role in your life in view of God's mercy, in view of what he has done. You might get tired of hearing that over these next few weeks as I speak. In view of God's mercy, live your lives. If you've been around the Bible at all, spent much time in church or not, you've certainly heard of the Sermon on the Mount. You've probably read it and gone, oh my goodness, wow, that's amazing. It's incredible teaching. Wow, that is challenging. It's a foundational teaching of our faith. And numerous times in the Sermon on the Mount, what we hear from Jesus is he goes, listen, you have heard but I tell you. Do you recognize that? Do you remember that? He's going along and he's teaching and he's getting ready to say something on a certain subject or topic or anything. And he goes, listen, you have heard, in other words, I know that there are other ways of looking at this and you've heard it this way, but I tell you. And he's coming at us and he's going, be careful. Be careful not to conform to the patterns that you hear in the day-to-day. Now, I'm convinced that we know what the you have heard stuff is in our culture. We hear it all the time. We're inundated with it, pummeled with it, if you like. It just constantly comes. But what I'm concerned is are we as aware of the but I tell you stuff? What is the I tell you stuff? What is the renewing bit? Well, it starts with understanding who God is and what he's done for us in view of his mercy. Live these lives. Do you know the mercy of God? Do you understand who he is and what he's done? The kingdom teaches us so many things. So the kingdom will come along and will say things like, don't just do good to those who you like, or who can or likely will return the favor. Love your neighbor, yes, that's what the world would say, but the kingdom would say, but pray for your enemy. Well, that's pretty different. It's easy to love someone who likes us, who's, reciprocates. When we do something nice for them, you're kind of waiting. Oh, didn't happen today. It might happen tomorrow. They were probably busy. Give them a benefit of the doubt, right? Then you're waiting, a few days goes by, and you're like, wait, what? I did so much for them. What is going on? And we have this very natural, sadly, thing within us that wants the reciprocation. Like that didn't actually, maybe we thought we did it just because we wanted to, just because we wanted to bless someone. But when it doesn't come back to us, the kingdom says, don't just do good to those who you like, but do good to your enemy. Pray for your enemy. It actually says in such a powerful phrase, and it says, as far as it's possible, live at peace with everyone. That's not stuff that we necessarily pick up from the world, from the patterns that are laid out before us. These are things that Jesus came to not only say, but he demonstrated. As far as it's possible, live at peace with everyone. This is the kingdom. This is what God is calling to. And I just want to remind you, this is in view of God's mercy and how he has loved you and what he has done for you, what he is doing now for you. These are the ways that we respond. In humility, Paul would say, in relationship to Jesus, in humility, consider others more highly than yourself. Tweet that out. Do we tweet? We don't tweet. I can't remember what it's called. In humility, consider others more highly than yourselves. Listen, I know you probably have never pulled a trigger on someone, but have you got angry at someone? Have you harbored your anger to the point where it starts to become a seething hate? The kingdom would say, don't take revenge. Don't take revenge. Don't allow bitterness to take root. this isn't really summer fun stuff. This is challenging stuff from our God. He's completely turning things on its head. I mean, we hear all the time, well, no, you deserve that. You deserve this. You deserve that. I'm not saying that phrase is always wrong, but it's really close to entitlement. It's really close to sort of seeping in and destroying the ability for you to have contentment. Oh, you deserve that. Paul's saying, will you wrestle with the stuff that just sort of comes really naturally within culture? Are you willing to pause and to think? I mean, consumerism is a deadly vapor, if you like, a gas that just pervades our culture. And it breeds envy and jealousy, becomes an unhealthy appetite for more. To get the latest and to have the better. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with buying something new or getting the latest. Like that's not what I'm saying. But is it the drive that's within you that you have to? Like, do you have to? Well, no, I don't have to. I want to. Okay, awesome. Yeah, just as I'm saying this, like, all I'm asking for us is to challenge the cultural norms. The expected things that are being pitched at us constantly. Because when we just sort of drink them in without any check, the destruction that it can do to us is incredible. Jesus actually said, you actually truly find life when you give it away. When you learn to serve. Joy is actually more often found on the other side of sacrifice versus self-indulgence. It's just the way we've been made. And I don't believe that Jesus is just trying to be some killjoy up in the sky, just pew, 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 shooting us down, right? Like every time we want something nice or new or like it doesn't matter if it's new. That's not the point. The point is this something that is just becoming so significant in our life that it becomes the prominent thing. That's a pattern of this world. We got to be careful. Where this comes in, truly, I think is a little bit of a trust issue. Can we trust God that he really does have our best interest at heart? That he really does know us best, knows what's best for us. It's an issue, if you like, of lordship. In Luke chapter 5, there was this interaction between the disciples and Jesus. And the disciples had been out, they were fishermen, right? Experts, like trained professionals. They knew what they were doing. They weren't just some weekend warrior trying to figure it out. No, this is what they did. So they had this, and they were talking with Jesus and all this kind of stuff. And Jesus kind of said, "Hey guys, you should head back out fishing. Cast your boats out, get out there, and go where it's like really deep. Go, and throw your nets out, and go for it." And Simon's like, Jesus, we were just out there, remember? We had just come in, and then when we had our little talk and all that kind of stuff, like, we are tired. What? Come on. What? And then Simon said this. Words that I hope can become like a bit of a mantra in my life. That is not always the mantra in my life. Jesus says, push your boat out. Simon's like, oh, we just did this, Lord. Oh, I don't want to do this. But because you said so, I will. And I'm wondering, who gets that phrase in our life? What gets that phrase in our life? I can't overstate this, but the teachings of Jesus, the outflow of his life, his work on the cross, is to protect our souls. We're created by him. He understands what is best for us. I used to hate that when my parents said that to me. Hated that. Oh, we know what's best for you. No, you don't. I fear sometimes I'm doing that to God. And I wrestle with him and I fight with him. And yet I also know that I believe he really died. Like, he went to the cross for me. He died for me. He offered up his life to offer me forgiveness and new life, restorative life, renewed life. And yet it's hard because the patterns of this world are so prominent in and around my life. They can have say and sway. Do you know the story? I know you've heard this, Jesus said, but I tell you. Do you know but I tell you stuff? Do you trust it? The story of Jesus, knowing the gospel, the good news, it allows us to test the things that come our way, to test the patterns. And I just want you to remember, like, I was envisioning as I was praying this morning that I was kind of standing here and just had Jesus standing right next to me. It's kind of weird. But I'm trying to just sort of speak on his behalf. Recognizing that he's in our midst, that he's sitting right there with you. And that he really does care desperately. When you read God's word, do you read it that way? I don't always. I sometimes read it more as a textbook. Some Wikipedia thing. I don't know, like I'm looking for a quick answer. Rather than understanding and realizing, oh, hold on. In view of God's mercy, like, Jesus, what do you mean by that? Offer my body to you as can you interact? You see, you start interacting with the story, recognizing that God is right there with you. It becomes a powerful thing. And the truth is alive. It's a conversation. We ask him, we sit with him. We begin to view life in view of his mercy. By the power of Spirit. Just a couple pages earlier, Paul was talking in Romans, I believe it was chapter 8, and he said, listen, I'm not just throwing this stuff at you and you just have to figure it out on your own. I'm promising you and I'm telling you that the Spirit of God dwells within each one of you. And the same Spirit that raised Jesus from the dead is the Spirit who is with you. And the promise from God, or the Father to Jesus, to us as his people, was that the Spirit was going to come and was going to be our guide and our counselor and help us to live this out. To stave off the conformity to the ideologies and the ways and the patterns of this world so that we can test and know God's will. When he is our way, when he is our truth, when he is our life, when our identity is secure in Jesus, his mercy, his gift of salvation, his work on the cross, knowing that he sees us, that he knows you, that he has you, that he holds you in his hand, that he's our shepherd, we're his sheep in the midst of the dark days. He calls us his child. We're no longer defined by our past. We're no longer defined by our performance. We're no longer defined by what others say or have done to us. We're his child. When that takes root, when that gets into our soul, we begin to have the ability to consider others more highly than ourselves, to learn how to pray for our enemies, how to forgive, how to fight jealousy, rage, revenge, because he's got us. We're his child. And our identity is him. Our purpose, we begin to see our purpose to join God as a redemptive, restorative mission. And we live as deployed agents of renewal to our neighbors, to our enemies, to our competitors, to whomever it is. And we're adopted into the family of God as children. Men and women and children here in this room together, not by birth. Oh yeah, some of you have a few family members here and all that kind of stuff, and that's cool. But we're brought into this family, not by societal position, but by the work of Jesus on the cross. We're all equals at the foot of the cross. And we can live collectively. We can live together in view of God's mercy. We're broken, we're messed up children of God, living in his grace and his mercy as our spiritual act of worship. On Sunday, yep. But the other 6 days too. Let me pray. God, I want to thank you for your presence here. That God, as we gather in these settings, you've promised, as we talked earlier, about how you are here and you make your presence known. And I want to thank you for that. But God, man, as you know, it's tough to follow you in all of life and for all of life. It's tough to follow you in a world in which the ideologies, the constant sort of pushing of a self-generated identity. I mean, it's just hard to push that off, to defeat that. But God, I would just pray for myself. I pray for each one here, for those watching online, that we might recognize and we might understand what you have done for us on the cross, that you saw us, you call us by name. And God, when you were on the cross and you said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. You were forgiving us, God, because we don't know what we're doing. We get distracted by the shiny and all the things that are going on in this life. And we forget about your mercy and your grace and your goodness. And yet, God, I believe, and I think that's why we're here today. We believe that you really do have our best interests at heart, but it's just a challenge. So God, would you just continue to persevere with us? Thank you for that promise, that you don't leave us. So just as you look down at us from the cross, you look down at us with forgiveness and grace and mercy. Thank you for that. Let each one of us here know that you see us, you know us, that you hold us. God, we need that reminder. Pray these things in Jesus' name. Amen.